Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, across these great airwaves. It's Cleveland time, 10-cent beer night and everything. And I'll tell you, move the Browns out of the way. I know they're 8-3. Let's not talk about the Cavaliers. LeBron James ain't there. And the Indians are a few months away from spring training. We'll find out how that looks with this COVID-19 circling the country. But the American Sports History Podcast with my mentor, my brother and a friend, Peter Ray, taking center stage here. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing it. He's got a great guest today, 347-205-9631. You can email mancinisports@yahoo.com. Catch the archive version on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports, all the podcast platforms. Without further ado, let me lay out the red carpet. Put the podium in its place. Give him the mic. Peter, first of all, how are you? Second of all, how can people get a hold of you? Third of all, you got one hell of a guest tonight, my friend.
Oh, hi, Mark. The famous three questions, which always challenge me to remember them in order. I'm doing well. Let's see. Okay, and let's see. I have a YouTube channel. It's my name, Peter J. Ray, R-E-A, and I have a website. It's called Adventures in History with Peter J. Ray at peterjray.com. I've made 699 history videos, including every year in Cleveland baseball history, going back to 1869. 171 videos in that. Now, tonight, you're absolutely right about tonight's guest. He is from Bakersfield, California, and has had a tremendous career had a tremendous baseball playing career, and has had a tremendous career as a sports announcer. He's a co-host of Marked Men Madness on the Stables Media. Welcome to the show again. It's an honor and a privilege to have again on the show the one and only Mark Heffernan.
Hey, Peter, what's happening? I don't know about the tremendous baseball career. I was pretty good, but I should have gone farther than I did. But thanks for mentioning that. We talked a lot about it on our program last week, MMM, when you were on, asking me a lot of questions about base stealing and things like that. Well, I did well in high school and in O'Kane and JC, but kind of flubbed up after that. I would have liked to have made some of that big-time money that pro athletes make today. You know, Jared Dudley signs with the Lakers. I think he's really a mediocre player, maybe a nice guy, good in the locker room. That's what they always say. I mean, this guy's going to make $2.6 million per year, $2.6 million, and he plays about 7.5 minutes a game. Nothing like being an NBA player, dude.
Yeah, it's a crazy world for sure. Now, if you don't mind, I'm curious about your background. You grew up in Bakersfield. Were both of your parents from California?
My dad was born and raised in Bakersfield, went to Bakersfield High, then St. Mary's College in Moraga, then was in the service in the Navy and played for Great Lakes. My mom was born in Newark, New Jersey, and she was born and raised in Waukegan, Illinois, North Chicago. So they met when he was in the service in the early 40s.
And you said your father played the Great Lakes Naval Station in Chicago for
he played at Bakersfield High, then St. Mary's College in Moraga in the Bay Area, and then I guess he played for Great Lakes Naval Academy
in Chicago.
Yeah, kind of single wing offense. I think he was left half. In that position, the athlete either ran, passed, or sometimes even punted the ball. My dad was pretty good. I mean, I remember growing up, my dad could do everything well. You know, table tennis, ping pong, you name it. He was just he was a natural athlete.
Was Paul Brown his coach at Great Lakes?
You know, I don't really know. He didn't. You know, my dad was a very humble man. He didn't really talk a lot about his career growing up, and he'd take my brother and I to the park, and he coached us once in a while, but he was usually busy with work. But he didn't talk a lot about his career. My brother would probably know more than I would, or my eldest sister would know more about his life back then than I would. I just know that he played for Great Lakes. I'm not sure how many years or who was his coach.
Because Paul Brown was that was part of his background. You know, the founder of the Cleveland Browns. I wonder if they overlap there at Great Lakes.
Well, I know my dad played for Goldie Griffith at BHS, and they named a stadium after him, Griffith Stadium. And he played for Slip Madigan at St. Mary's, and Slip was very famous during that time. They were one of the few colleges to take, coast-to-coast train rides to play football. Slip had a lot of nice donors on the side. Sometimes the university didn't know about it, but he treated his players like royalty back then in the late 30s and 40s when my dad played for St. Mary's. They played Fordham and schools back there. Their main rival was Santa Clara in the Bay Area. They played, big-time schools despite them being a small Catholic school. And then they actually won the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, I think after his sophomore or junior year, one of those years. Low-scoring game. I think they played, I believe they played TCU, Texas Christian.
Mark, what has been your primary career?
My primary career?
Yes.
Basically, foundation was radio broadcasting. First, I was a disc jockey, on-air personality. And then I produced a lot of shows, art shows, public affairs shows, news shows, and a lot of I was in public radio the first two sessions, in Fresno and also in Houston. So I worked with people from China, from England, and from Mexico, and all over the world because those are the type of people that produce shows on public radio. And then I kind of merged into news. I was a newscaster on radio. I had some news interview shows. And then eventually, after 7 or 8 years, began doing a sports talk show, and then began doing play-by-play in the mid-1980s when I came back to California. So I was in Fresno and Houston from actually 1977 until 1982, thereabouts. So I actually began as a regular radio person, on-air person doing jazz, blues, top 40, things like that, and then kind of merged eventually into doing sports, and then actually into news, then sports. Been doing a combination of both. Then over the past 5-7 years, primarily sports, public address, and play-by-play, then with the podcasting and things like that.
Now, looking at the map of California, I see you're not far from Death Valley. Have you spent much time there?
Not really. I don't like the name, Death Valley.
Well, do you remember that TV show Death Valley Days in the 60s?
Yeah, that was a good show.
That's what comes to mind.
I think it got to about 130 one day this year. We had some hot days, 128 to 130. I believe they set a record. Now, Bakersfield, we had a very hot summer. I thought our summer was long and hotter than normal. It's always hot. But I don't know how many consecutive days we had at 100. But usually I'm gone more during the summer. This year I was pretty much here the whole time. Usually I'm in the Bay Area off and on to different junctions maybe a week at a time or 10 days at a time. But I was here most of, from June all the way through September, and it was very warm, very hot. And I don't know what was our highest temperature this year. We might have got up to 110, 112. I'm not really sure. But it was hot throughout California. My sisters live in El Sobrante in the Bay Area. The other one lives in San Marcos by San Diego. And they're actually closer to the water. But they have some days both close to 100, which is very unusual for their areas.
Is John Steinbeck connected with Bakersfield?
I think he's more connected to. Isn't he more connected to Stanford up in the Bay Area?
I don't know. I was just trying to think of what's famous what's the famous reference to Bakersfield in history?
Well, it was named after Colonel Thomas Baker. It was originally an oasis in the desert. People would come through here to get supplies and water on their way to the desert and vice versa. But it's famous for being not the birthplace, but the place of Buck Owens. The country and western singer who's on Hee Haw, and he owns Cuz Radio here locally, and he probably owned about, when he was alive, maybe 10 radio stations across the country, all country and western. And you have Buck Owens Boulevard right now. It replaced Pierce Road. And you have the Buck Owens Crystal Palace, which in normal times has a lot of concerts. But I guess they haven't had a concert there probably since February or March. And they bring in some big-name performers to the Buck Owens Palace.
You said you lived in Houston.
Another guy, sports-wise, Frank Gifford.
Frank Gifford's from Bakersfield?
Giants. Yeah, he played for Bakersfield High, where my dad went, played at USC, played for the Giants. Remember, he played in, one of those first games on TV in '59. I think the Giants were playing in the NFL championship. And also during the time he was a player, he was actually reporting for CBS, I believe. Because as you know, back then, Peter, guys didn't make a lot of money, playing ball. So Frank was actually doing some sports during the time he was playing during the off season. And of course, as you know, he did Monday Night Football and was really kind of an icon. I met him years ago. He was promoting a thing called the $1 Million Mile. And I met him and interviewed him somewhere here in town. And that's a very nice guy, very similar to what you saw on TV. A very nice man, very gracious, very charming, nice-looking guy. And that's Frank Gifford, you know. So, obviously, people knew he came from Bakersfield back then. So he was around before Buck Owens. And he was born and raised, I believe, in Bakersfield, Gifford. And there's been some other people along. I think some politicians have some ties to Bakersfield.
Yeah, Frank Gifford, Don Meredith, Howard Cosell, never been a...
Harry Gifford. We had the grandson of Howard Cosell on Markman Madness, I guess about a month and a half to 2 months ago. And this guy's doing PA for the New York Mets. He and a woman kind of trade off, and he does that. His background is primarily in theater, the grandson of Howard Cosell. And we talk a lot about Howard. He's a gracious man and really loved his family. But the younger one is more background, more in theater and theater arts, which I spent a little time doing, and primarily doing public address. So a little bit different than Howard Cosell, obviously. Of course, who has been the same as Howard Cosell, except for Mark Mancini after all these years.
Yeah, Cosell, his way of talking, this is Howard Cosell. He had such a unique style that was just, so entertaining. And so I mean, to me, if I was running Monday Night Football, I'd hire 3 guys and hire a former player like Frank Gifford and a former player like Don Meredith from the South, and then find a guy and say, watch every Howard Cosell and just imitate Cosell's the way he talked, because people loved it, And those 3, that was just magic. I just can't. I think about that a lot, and they've never. And I can't even get it. It's not even on local TV anymore. Monday Night Football.
Remember how he used to poke fun at Danny Don Meredith? Howard had a great time, just like razzing him all the time. Danny Don.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And Gifford be calling the game, and those 2 guys would be going at it with each other. 2 very different personalities, and that's what people loved about the show.
Gifford was always very smooth. He didn't make a lot of jokes and everything. He was a professional, and he would say a funny thing once in a while, but that wasn't really his gig. That's not who he was. You meet him in person, you see him on the air. Very, very smooth talker, just a really nice guy. But not the type of guy that's going to criticize you or really make fun of you on the air. Anything he did would be, kind of tongue-in-cheek. That wasn't his style. But you have him in the middle, then you have the other 2 guys that are Danny Don was a former player and kind of a clown. Then you have Cosell, who likes to needle anybody. Started with Muhammad Ali. So, everybody have their own style. And I guess that show was very unique for many years. And it was the only – we just had NFL football then on Sundays during the day. We didn't have Sunday night football. We didn't have Thursday night football. And that was the prime time game of the week. And that's why it was so special. Now you have so many games on during the week, it's just one of many. It's Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night. Then you got high school and college. Back then it was more special to me because there wasn't as much football on the air. And you didn't have the cable networks going when those guys were on the air.
Yeah, it was really something. Gifford would call the game, and the other 2 fellows were, it was very entertaining. I really enjoyed it.
I don't know if the guys that do Monday Night Football now, I guess it's on ESPN and, for many years, they seem more mechanical to me than those dudes long ago. You look at Frank and you look at Howard and Danny Don and I guess O.J. Simpson after that. To me, they showed more personality. And a lot of guys today that are on TV, I think they're just kind of mechanical and it seems like they're choreographed. They're choreographed is to explain a play in a certain way before the commercial break. And then they're choreographed to say a certain thing before they go into a commercial when they come out. And to me, those guys were more more entertaining. The games were funner to watch because they have more personality.
Well, and then there's John Madden, who I thought did a tremendous job for many years.
Oh, yeah. he was on. Wasn't he on CBS, and then they switched to Fox? He and Pat Summerall. So
right.
They were like the number one team in football for years. Madden, Summerall. And Summerall didn't talk a lot. He had a great deep voice, very concise. He let Madden steal the show, so they worked well together. And the whole key, as I mentioned you and to Mark Mancini and other people, as a play-by-play and a commentator, they have to work together. It's not the commentator's job to overdo the play-by-play guy or to talk too much. They should say whatever they got to say in 10 to 12 seconds or so and then shut up. You know, you have roles right there. And I listen to a lot of games on radio, and most of the commentators are pretty good. They're ex-coaches or ex-athletes, and they do their homework. They're very good. Some like to talk too much, but most of them are pretty good. But radio is really the key. You listen to a game on radio, and the announcers do a great job providing the word's eye view, and they have to be so creative with their play calling as opposed to what you hear or what you watch on TV. On TV, they're talking about a lot of other things that don't really apply, that are irrelevant to the game at hand, but they get away with it because people are not stupid. People can see what's happening, on a game, HD screen and the replays. Radio is much more, can be much more difficult, especially at the higher level college or pros, because you really have to explain what's happening to people they can't see. But that is, to me, one of the great elements of radio. The fact of being creative with your mouth, with your mind, with your heart, and just not only talking about the game, but the ambiance surrounding the game. And normally we have fans, but maybe there's a beautiful harvest moon in the background. Maybe the wind is, very gusty. You're not really going to talk about that much on TV, but you mention things like that on radio, and you have to be creative when you're discussing it with your commentator or whoever. And that's what I love about radio. It will always be my foundation. It will always be my first love as far as a profession is concerned.
Yeah, and back in the 70s, my memory is that there weren't that many games on TV. So as a kid, I listened to a lot of games on the radio. Cleveland Indians games, Cleveland Cavs games, and then Browns games on Sunday. I'd be raking leaves and listening to the game on the radio, and so I have very fond memories of radio, because, you can...
Well, that's me growing up. You don't believe how many years I listened to the USC-UCLA game on radio. Back then, they weren't on TV that much, and then there was a period of time where they were on TV on a delayed basis, just like UCLA basketball, when they were playing for John Wooden, when he won 10 titles in 12 years. I'd say half of that time, the KTLA Channel 5 would play UCLA games at home on Friday and Saturday nights, like after the news at 11 o'clock. So the games are already over with. And if I went out somewhere, my dad, I told, don't tell me the final score. And I'd probably fall asleep before the end of the game. Of course, UCLA then was winning practically every game. But they were on Channel 5 in L.A. at 11 o'clock at night. And they ended up, maybe 12:45. So my brother and I would come home and watch the games with my dad. And you talk about radio, it was tailor-made for baseball. Some of the greatest announcers in the history, sports announcers, made their mark broadcasting baseball, Major League Baseball. Some of the great voices. It's a slower-paced game. You get to tell a lot of stories, and there's so much history to baseball. Baseball goes back a lot longer than American football and NBA basketball. It was a true American sport, at one time. And by the way, I thought about you, Peter. My brother and I were watching a movie that he really loves quite a bit, and I do too, The Natural. It was on the other night. I think it was on Thanksgiving night. And, with Robert Redford.
Right.
And, kind of a fictitious story, but what a great ending. I mean, this guy, he got shot by a woman years before. I guess it curtailed his career by 15 years, and he comes back, and everybody thinks that he's like an old man. He's a grandpa. And he actually has signed a contract, and they couldn't believe how he hits. I mean, he was an excellent fielder, was a great hitter. Their team was going nowhere. I guess it was the New York Knights. And then basically he took them to the championship. But what happened is that he got that bullet actually came out. He was in the hospital during the time they were in the championship. And the owner of the team was, let's say he wasn't a very nice guy. He kind of bet against him. And then there was one that liked him that she kind of bet against him, and they thought, no way he's going to play in that last game. And he comes up to the plate, and he's like bleeding. And so the catcher's calling for, a high and tight pitch. And he's going up against a guy who's like a 24-year-old flamethrower with 2 runners on, 2 outs from the top of the 9th inning. And they're down by 2 runs. And, of course, he hits a shot. He hits the tower, the light pole, and 3-run shot. They win the game. And you see him running around the base pass and the electricity floating down. That was awesome. And, he found out that he had a son. He found out that lady that liked him when they were sweethearts in high school and they went their separate ways. I guess he was like pacing back and forth with his jacket on, and she gave him a note. She was at the game with his son, who he didn't know at the time. She sent him a note when he was in the dugout, and I guess and he reads it, and he's pacing back and forth, and he found out that his son, is there in the stands. So that gave him, I guess, extra encouragement. So when he went up to the plate, he hit it out with a Savoy. His own bat he broke in 2. And so he told the bat boy to pick him out a winner. And the bat boy gave him a bat called the Savoy, I guess. And then, of course, he hit that shot. And, great ending. Then they show him playing catch with his son at the end of the show. One thing about Redford, though, he had a baseball background. And you could tell by watching him he was an athlete. He threw the ball left-handed, but he didn't look like Gary Cooper. He looked like a guy that can run, that can catch and throw the ball. So I like when guys that play parts of athletes that look athletic. I can't stand when they used to, in the old days, put a lot of guys who were, paramount actors in the roles of athletes, and they look terrible half the time. And don't get me wrong, but some basketball players, it's like putting a basketball player on the mound, trying to throw a pitch to home plate. And a lot of guys over the years have tried to pitch from the mound. Now they have you line up and pitch the ball from the beginning of the dirt to make it easier, more flat. I remember Kevin Garnett and a lot of guys in the past that are great athletes in basketball in another sport, but they can't throw the ball from the mound. And I wonder, have they warmed up prior to that, or they just walk out there and try to throw it? Because it's not that easy. But there's one thing that's going to make you look bad. I guess there's maybe 2 things. If you line up to shoot a free throw and you throw up an air ball, and then in baseball, it's if they give you the ball to throw out the first pitch, and you bounce it about 5 times to the catcher, or throw the ball about 10 feet over the catcher's head. Now, to me, it looks bad. Now, people laugh about it. I think it kind of sucks, if you ask me.
Yeah, I was just thinking about radio broadcasts.
Fauci did that, by the way. Fauci did that. He was throwing out the first pitch for a Washington game.
Yeah.
And I was telling my sister, he's no athlete. She goes, be quiet, Mark. He's an old man. I said, hey, he should have thrown a few warm-up pitches on the sidelines. I said, guys that play don't run out there without warming up for 15, 20 minutes. You got to get your arm loose. Do you want to look bad out there? Look like a fool? Because you can't look like a fool out there playing baseball.
In 1989, I was in Switzerland working as a high school teacher, and I caught a Browns game on U.S. military radio, and it had and Jack Buck and Hank Stram were the announcers, and I just thought they were tremendous. Jack Buck and Hank Stram. And I remember Stram had been a coach
for many years, and they won with Stram in 1970, KC. So there was a long drought, and they have a shot. They have a shot to win back-to-back, but I'm not guaranteeing anything because it's very difficult to win back-to-back Super Bowls, and things can happen. Your top players got to be healthy. Pittsburgh Steelers are there. Nobody's giving them a lot of credit except for Mark Mancini and his Steel Curtain. People automatically think that KC's going to win again this year. I don't think they're playing that well. I think they're getting by in a lot of games. Maybe they'll turn it up. I'm not really sure. Their defense is okay. It got better in the playoffs last year because they had 3 come-from-behind victories in the playoffs. But it's tough winning 2 years in a row. But I think the Steelers and KC are the best teams in the AFC. But watch out for the Tennessee Titans. Now, they run the football very well with Henry. They are a tough, physical team, and they gave KC all they wanted last year. I still think Pittsburgh and KC are better than Tennessee, but Tennessee's playing well, and you got to hold down Derrick Henry. It's like 175 yards last week. The week before, he had like maybe 130 yards in the second half. He's a bull, that guy. But they are a tough, physical team. and they're a team to be reckoned with. As far as the NFC, to me, I think New Orleans is the best overall team, and they're winning without Drew Brees, but they won't win an NFC championship without him. And I think it's a toss-up, between Green Bay and, I don't know, Seattle, Tampa Bay, but I think the top AFC teams are better than the top teams in the NFC.
I was thinking about the two NFL TV guys who both were Dallas Cowboys quarterbacks, Troy Aikman and Tony Romo. And Aikman won, I don't know, was it 3 Super Bowls, 2 or 3 Super Bowls, and Romo didn't win.
3 Super Bowls in a 4-year span, 3 and 4 years.
And Romo didn't have much of a career, but between the two, I find Aikman's to be a very flat announcer, and I think Tony Romo is tremendous. So I think it's kind of interesting how those two. You want to talk about Troy Aikman and Tony Romo as announcers?
Well, I like Troy Aikman because he went to UCLA and was a very good quarterback there. Yeah, you're right. He is very flat, but he seems to work well with Buck. And they're still considered they're the top team on Fox, and Jim Nantz and Romo are the top team on CBS, right? Yeah, the top team on CBS. And Romo has a different. I don't really care for Romo's voice, but he does have more inflection than Troy Aikman, and Jim Nantz is more low key. So it's really how you work with the other person. Both are very good. I mean, take your pick. You like Romo better than Aikman, that's fine. Aikman's always been kind of flat and always kind of been deadpanned. He was that way when he was playing in college. He's never been a real excitable type of guy, but apparently Fox likes his style, and it works out very well with Buck. And Romo works out well with Jim Nantz.
And then there's Chris Collinsworth, who has like the deepest voice among announcers.
I like him because he really does his homework. I saw a report on him, and this guy is heavy into the computer and getting all the stats of the players in both teams, looking at tendencies and going back and looking at the teams that are going to be playing on Sunday night, maybe watching them 2, 3, and 4 weeks in the past and looking at mannerisms, things like that. This was a guy's about 6'6" wide receiver. He was very fast, was a very good football player for Cincinnati back in the day, and was quite an athlete in high school. And he's in his early 60s, but he's done a great job, I think, of being a commentator in the NFL for many years. So he's done very well in his career.
And he teams up with Al Michaels, I believe, who's been around forever.
Yes, sir. Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth. It's all about how you match up with the other person. All those 3 teams do very well. They work together for many years, and if you're Collinsworth, Michaels allows Collinsworth to talk a lot. Collinsworth has a lot to say. Michaels, has a great voice, a style, so he allows Collinsworth to. And Collinsworth sometimes is, I wouldn't say controversial, but he says it like it is, and that's fine. He's got that leeway with the NBC, and it works out very well with Al Michaels. And then Tirico does a game here and there when Michaels decides to take a week off. Mike Tirico, he used to be at ESPN.
I was thinking about Tony Kubek, who had a tremendous career for the Yankees in the early 60s.
Yes, sir.
And then I remember him as an announcer in the 70s talking about Davey. He's saying, Joe Morgan, if he gets 1 foot on the artificial turf, then he's set to try to steal second. And of course, he took a ground ball in the throat in the World Series. Tony Kubek, yeah. Good guy.
A ground ball hit me in practice one time. He hit me right in the mouth when I was a freshman at Garces Memorial High School, and I was practicing with the varsity, but I played JV that year. And I remember at the old field, the ball it was hit pretty hard, and he took a shot and hit me right in the mouth. And my mouth was bleeding, but fortunately, never got hit in the Adam's apple. But I was a shortstop, so I played third base, so I took a lot of hard ground balls, but that's about the only time that ever happened. There was a few times where it bounced over my head and went off my glove, but that's the only time that the ball whacked me in the face, and it wasn't during the game. It was during practice, and I thought that was pretty amazing.
Our guest tonight has been the one and only Mark Heffernan. Time has flown, and we are out of time. Mark, do you have any final words for our audience?
Go Steelers!
Go Steelers. Yeah, God bless Mark Mancini, our fearless leader. Thanks so much again for coming on the show again, Mark, and keep up the outstanding work you're doing. It's always
Hey, thanks, Peter.
pleasure talking with you, and you're a very talented guy and a very personable man and a very very knowledgeable, and I'm impressed by your career and everything and all your knowledge of sports. Because to be honest,
I wish I was as handsome as you and Mark Mancini.
What's that?
I just wish I was as handsome as you and Mark Mancini.
Well, I wouldn't. You haven't seen what I look like.
Yeah, I have.
Oh, on Facebook. Okay. Well,
yes, sir.
You're a kind man. I'm not sure many people would agree with that. God bless you, Mark. We'll get together again, either on your show or my show.
God bless
Thanks
you,
so much
Peter.
for
Thanks,
coming.
Man.
Okay, dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Mark.